I was sitting on my back porch, watching the morning mist rise off Willow Creek, when I heard the groaning metal sound that would change everything. The HOA's decorative bridge, the one they insisted on building right over the narrowest part of my creek, 3 years ago, was making noises like a dying animal. I set down my coffee and walked to the property line just in time to see the entire structure buckle in the middle, twist sideways, and collapse into the water below with a thunderous crash that sent my neighbor's dog into a barking frenzy. I am Ethan Morrison, and I have lived on this 5-acre property in Riverside County, Virginia, for 8 years. My land sits at the bend of Willow Creek, a natural waterway that meanders through the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision. When I bought this place, it was just outside the HOA boundaries. Then, 4 years ago, the HOA expanded, annexed my property without my consent through some legal loophole involving county rezoning. And suddenly, I was paying $400 a month in dues for services I never wanted. The bridge they built was part of their community beautification project. Never mind that I told them the ground was too soft on the south bank, or that the creek flooded every spring. Deborah Patterson, the HOA president, had insisted it would be a charming focal point for the walking trail they were developing. She overruled the engineers' concerns about the foundation, cut corners on the construction bid, and rushed the project through in time for her re-election campaign. Now it was a pile of twisted metal and splintered wood sitting in my creek. I pulled out my phone and took about 20 photos from different angles. The morning sun was catching the wreckage perfectly, highlighting every buckled beam and snapped support cable. I was already thinking about liability, about property damage, about the fact that this was going to be the HOA's problem, not mine. My phone rang within 15 minutes. Deborah Patterson, right on schedule. "Ethan, I need you to clean up that bridge debris immediately," she said without preamble. No greeting, no acknowledgement of the disaster. It is unsightly and reflects poorly on our community standards. "Good morning to you too, Deborah," I said, keeping my voice level. "The bridge that your organization built on my property without proper engineering has collapsed. I will not be cleaning it up because it is not my responsibility. The bridge was approved by the Architectural Review Committee and built on HOA easement land," she snapped. "You are required to maintain the aesthetic standards of any structures visible from common areas. Deborah, the bridge collapsed because your committee hired your brother-in-law's construction company despite his bid being the only one without proper liability insurance. I have the meeting minutes. I filed a formal objection. This is entirely on the HOA." There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice had that tight, controlled quality that middle-aged women perfected when they were about to make your life miserable. "I am issuing you a citation for failure to maintain community standards. You have 72 hours to remove the debris, or we will fine you $100 per day." I laughed, actually laughed. "You do that, Deborah. Meanwhile, I will be calling my lawyer about the property damage, the safety hazard, and the fact that your negligent construction just destroyed a protected wetland habitat." I hung up before she could respond. The thing about Willow Creek is that it is not just a pretty stream. It is a year-round waterway that connects to the larger Shenandoah River system. There are protections, regulations, environmental considerations. The HOA had gotten the permits for the bridge 3 years ago, but those permits had conditions. Regular inspections, maintenance protocols, environmental impact assessments. I knew for a fact they had not done any of that, because I received copies of all county filings related to the creek it ran through my property after all. I called my lawyer, Marcus Chen, who had helped me fight the HOA annexation 4 years ago. We lost that battle, but Marcus was always ready for round 2. "Ethan, my favorite client," Marcus answered. "What did the HOA do now? Their bridge collapsed into my creek. Deborah wants me to clean it up and is threatening daily fines." Of course she is. I could hear him typing. "Send me photos, any communications you have had with them about the bridge and your property survey. I will file for an emergency injunction to prevent them from accessing your land and send them a notice of liability." Already sending the photos. "Marcus, there is something else. The bridge was the main access point for the entire eastern section of the subdivision. There are 47 homes over there. Without it, they have to drive an extra 8 miles around to reach the main road. How does that affect you?" I smiled, looking out at my property. "There is an old access road on the western edge of my land. It connects to Morrison Lane, named after my grandfather, who originally owned all this land before it was subdivided in the 1970s. It is technically a private road. I own it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You are thinking of offering access for a fee. Ethan, be very careful. The HOA will fight this. Let them fight. They put me in this position." After I hung up with Marcus, I walked the old access road. It had not been used regularly in years, but it was still passable. The gravel was compacted, the drainage was decent, and it was wide enough for 2 cars to pass each other carefully. It ran from Morrison Lane, across my property, and connected to Eastbrook Drive, which served all those homes on the far side of the creek. My grandfather, Robert Morrison, had maintained this road until his death in 1998. When the land was sold and subdivided, the developer had kept Morrison Lane as a public road, but the access road across what became my property remained private. I had never gated it because nobody used it until now. By noon, I had already seen 5 cars attempt to use the old bridge location, realize it was destroyed, and then slowly drive around, looking for alternatives. The detour through county roads added significant time to their commute. I knew this because I had driven it myself once when the main subdivision entrance was being repaved. I spent the afternoon at the hardware store in downtown Riverside. I bought materials for a simple gate, a lockbox, signs, and a ring camera system. Nothing fancy, but effective. That evening, as I was installing the gate at the Morrison Lane entrance to my access road, a white Lexus SUV pulled up. The woman who stepped out was wearing yoga pants, an oversized sweater, and had that particular haircut, you know the one, precisely angled bob, blonde with highlights that seemed to be standard issue for HOA board members. "Excuse me, what do you think you are doing?" she demanded, marching toward me. "Installing a gate on my private road, and you are." "I am Karen Hartwell, treasurer of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. This road is community access." Of course, her name was Karen. The universe had a sense of humor. "No, Miss Hartwell, this is a private road on my private property. It always has been. We have been using this road for years." "No, you have not. The community has been using the bridge which your organization built and which has now collapsed due to negligence. This road is an entirely separate access point, which I own." Her face flushed red. "You cannot just block community access. There are families with children on Eastbrook Drive who need to get to school. They can use the county detour, same as everyone else. Or," I paused for effect, "they can pay a toll to use my private road." "A toll? Are you insane? We will sue you." "You are welcome to try. My lawyer is Marcus Chen. You can have your HOA attorney contact him." I handed her a business card that I had printed that afternoon. It had my name, the words Morrison Lane Access Road, and a phone number. Toll is $15 per vehicle per crossing. Monthly passes available for $400. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. $400. That is extortion. That is the same amount I pay in HOA dues every month for services I did not ask for and do not want. Funny how that worked out. This is illegal. You cannot charge people to use a road. It is my private road, Miss Hartwell. I absolutely can. There is precedent. Look up private toll roads in Virginia. They are perfectly legal as long as there are alternative public routes available, which there are. She sputtered for another minute, threatened to call the police, the county, the governor, and possibly the president, then got back in her Lexus and sped off, gravel spraying from her tires. I finished installing the gate, mounted the camera, and posted clear signs. Private road. Toll required. $15 per crossing. Contact for monthly passes. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 6:30 a.m. I ignored it, drank my coffee, and watched as the first commuters from Eastbrook Drive discovered the new gate. The Ring camera captured everything beautifully. Confusion, anger, people taking photos of the signs, cars turning around. By 7 a.m., there was a line of vehicles at the gate. My phone had 17 voicemails. I decided it was time to address the situation. I walked down to the gate where about 12 cars were waiting. People got out looking frustrated. "Good morning, everyone," I said pleasantly. "As the signs indicate, this is a private toll road, $15 per crossing, cash or Venmo." A man in a business suit stepped forward. "This is ridiculous. We need to get to work." "Then you can pay the toll or take the county detour. Those are your options." "The HOA will never allow this. The HOA does not have jurisdiction over my private property or my private road." Now, who is first? A woman in a minivan with 2 kids in car seats rolled down her window. "I will pay. I have to get the kids to daycare and get to work. I cannot be late again." "Thank you. $15, please." She handed me a 20. I gave her $5 in change and opened the gate. She drove through and I closed it behind her. The man in the suit was furious. "This is extortion." "No, this is capitalism. You want to use my road, you pay for access. Nobody is forcing you." One by one, most of the cars paid. A few drove off angrily, presumably to take the long detour. By 8 a.m., I had collected $195. Not bad for an hour's work. My phone rang again. "Deborah Patterson, Ethan Morrison, you shut down that ridiculous toll operation immediately." "Good morning, Deborah. How can I help you?" "You are charging residents to access their homes. This is illegal, immoral, and I will have you arrested." "Feel free to call the police. I will wait. In the meantime, the toll stands. If the HOA had maintained the bridge properly, none of this would be necessary. We are holding an emergency board meeting tonight at 7 p.m. You are required to attend." "I am not required to do anything, but I will attend as a courtesy." "Where?" "The community center." "See you then." I spent the day researching Virginia property law, toll road regulations, and HOA limitations. Marcus had sent me a detailed memo confirming that I was on solid legal ground. The access road was entirely on my property. I had maintained it, and I had every right to control access. The existence of a public detour, even an inconvenient one, meant I was not restricting anyone's access to their property, just making it more expensive to use the convenient route. At 6:45 p.m., I drove to the Meadowbrook Heights Community Center. It was a nice building, paid for by all those HOA dues. Hardwood floors, a full kitchen, a meeting room with a large conference table. About 30 residents were already there, and they did not look happy. Deborah Patterson sat at the head of the table. flanked by Karen Hartwell and 3 other board members I vaguely recognized. There was a man in his 60s who I thought was the vice president, a younger guy who might have been the secretary, and an older woman who always wore too much perfume. "Thank you all for coming," Deborah began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We are here to address the outrageous and illegal behavior of Ethan Morrison, who is attempting to extort our community members." I raised my hand. "Point of order, Deborah. It is not extortion. It is a toll for private road usage." "You do not have the floor," she snapped. "Actually, if you are going to discuss my actions, I think I should be allowed to respond." A few residents murmured agreement. Deborah's jaw tightened, but she nodded curtly. "Fine, explain yourself." I stood up. "Happy to. 3 years ago, the HOA built a bridge over Willow Creek, which runs through my property. I objected to the construction methods, the choice of contractor, and the lack of proper engineering oversight. My objections were ignored. Yesterday morning, that bridge collapsed due to structural failure resulting from negligent construction and lack of maintenance. The collapse has destroyed part of the creek bed, which is a protected waterway, and has created a safety hazard on my property. The HOA has demanded that I clean up the debris, which I will not do, as it is not my responsibility." I paused, letting that sink in. "The bridge collapse has made the main access to Eastbrook Drive inconvenient, requiring a detour. However, there is an alternate route across my property via an old access road that my family has owned for decades. This is a private road. I have every legal right to control access to it. I have chosen to allow access for a toll of $15 per crossing or $400 per month for unlimited access." A man in the back shouted, "That is price gouging." "No, it is market pricing. I set the rate based on the value of the convenience provided and the cost I incur in maintaining the road. If you do not like the price, use the public detour. Nobody is forcing you to pay." Karen Hartwell stood up, her face flushed. "You are punishing innocent families because you have a vendetta against the HOA. I am exercising my property rights. If the HOA had not built a structurally unsound bridge, none of this would be happening. You created this situation." Deborah slammed her hand on the table. "We will not tolerate this. The board is voting tonight to file a lawsuit against you for restricting community access. Go ahead. My lawyer will enjoy defending this case. While you are at it, I will be filing my own lawsuit against the HOA for the bridge collapse, property damage, and environmental violations." That caused some commotion. Several residents started talking at once. A woman I recognized from the neighborhood stood up. "Wait, what environmental violations?" "The bridge collapse has destroyed a section of protected wetland," I explained. "The HOA had permits to build the bridge, but those permits required regular inspections and maintenance. When is the last time the bridge was inspected?" Deborah looked at the other board members. Nobody answered. "Exactly," I continued. "The county is going to investigate, and they are going to find that the HOA failed to comply with the permit conditions. There will be fines, possibly criminal charges for environmental damage." The vice president, whose name I learned was Gerald Thompson, spoke up. "Now hold on, let us not get ahead of ourselves. Maybe we can work out a compromise here." "I am open to reasonable discussions," I said. "But the toll stays in place until the HOA accepts responsibility for the bridge collapse and agrees to proper remediation." "What do you want?" Gerald asked. "First, the HOA acknowledges in writing that the bridge collapse was due to negligent construction and maintenance. Second, the HOA pays for professional removal of the debris and restoration of the creek bed. Third, the HOA drops any and all citations or fines against me related to this incident. Fourth, the HOA pays my legal fees. Deborah laughed harshly. Absolutely not. We are not admitting to anything. Then I guess we will see each other in court, I said. In the meantime, the toll stands. The meeting devolved into chaos after that. Residents were yelling at each other, at the board, at me. Some people were demanding the board settle with me. Others were calling me greedy and vindictive. It was entertaining in a way. I left after about an hour of circular arguments. Nothing was resolved, but I had made my position clear. Over the next week, the toll road became a strange new normal. Most of the Eastbrook Drive residents sucked it up and paid, though they were not happy about it. A few tried to argue with me every morning, which got old fast. I started just pointing at the sign and waiting. One enterprising teenager tried to sneak through by climbing over the gate at night. The Ring camera caught him, and I sent the footage to his parents with a polite note suggesting they might want to teach their son about property rights and trespassing laws. They paid for his crossing the next day and apologized profusely. The daily toll income was decent, between $150 and $250 per day, depending on how many people were willing to pay versus taking the detour. A few families bought monthly passes, which provided steadier income. Meanwhile, Marcus filed our lawsuit against the HOA. We alleged negligent construction, failure to maintain, property damage, and violation of environmental regulations. The County Environmental Office had indeed opened an investigation, and preliminary findings suggested the HOA had not conducted required inspections for over 2 years. The HOA's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Vance, filed a countersuit claiming I was illegally restricting access and creating a public nuisance. She also tried to get an emergency injunction to force me to open the road without charge. The judge denied it, ruling that since a public alternative route existed, I was within my rights to charge for access to my private road. That ruling did not make me popular in Meadowbrook Heights. Someone spray-painted "greedy jerk" on my mailbox. I filed a police report and installed more cameras. The vandalism stopped. Deborah Patterson started a petition to have the county declare the access road a public necessity and seize it through eminent domain. That went nowhere. The county attorney pointed out that the public detour, while inconvenient, was perfectly adequate, and there was no legal basis for seizing private property just because it would be more convenient for some residents. Karen Hartwell showed up at my gate one morning with a news crew. Local news, Channel 7, looking for a human interest story, or more likely, looking to paint me as the villain. The reporter, a young woman with perfect hair and a microphone, approached me with the camera rolling. "Mr. Morrison, Rachel Stevens, Channel 7 News. Can you comment on allegations that you are price gouging residents of Meadowbrook Heights?" "Happy to comment. I am charging a fair toll for use of my private road. Residents have a free alternative route available. They simply choose to pay for convenience. But $15 per crossing, that is over $300 a month for someone who commutes daily. Is not that excessive? Monthly unlimited passes are $400, which is what I pay in HOA fees each month. Seems fair to me. Critics say you are punishing innocent families because of a dispute with the HOA. Critics should direct their complaints to the HOA board that built a structurally deficient bridge and then blamed me when it collapsed. I am not punishing anyone. I am simply exercising my property rights. Karen jumped in front of the camera. He is holding our community hostage. Children cannot get to school. People are losing their jobs because they are late to work. This is inhumane. There is a public road, I said calmly. Nobody is hostage. They just have to leave 15 minutes earlier. 15 minutes. It is a 40-minute detour. Then pay the toll or petition the HOA to fix the bridge they broke. The news segment aired that evening. To my surprise, public opinion was split. Half the comments online called me greedy and heartless. The other half pointed out that the HOA had screwed up and I was just protecting my property. A few people even suggested I raise the toll. The controversy attracted attention beyond the local area. A regional newspaper ran a story. A legal blog discussed the property rights issues. Someone on Reddit made a thread about it that went viral, with thousands of people debating HOA overreach versus property rights versus community responsibility. Through all of this, the HOA still had not cleaned up the collapsed bridge. The debris sat in my creek, rusting and degrading. I documented everything, took weekly photos, and sent them to the county environmental office and my lawyer. About 3 weeks after the collapse, I got a call from Gerald Thompson, the HOA vice president. "Ethan, I want to talk off the record. Can we meet?" "Sure." "Coffee shop in Riverside tomorrow morning?" "That works." We met at a local cafe, a quiet place with decent coffee and comfortable chairs. Gerald looked tired. He was in his mid-60s, retired from some corporate job, and seemed like a reasonable person who had gotten stuck on a board run by Deborah Patterson's iron will. "Ethan, I am going to be straight with you," he said after we sat down. "The board is in over its head. The environmental investigation is finding major problems. The county is threatening fines of up to $50,000 for the permit violations. Our insurance company is denying coverage because we did not follow the required inspection protocols. We are looking at significant financial liability." "I am aware," I said. "My lawyer keeps me updated. Deborah is refusing to settle with you. She is convinced we can win in court, that we can force you to open the road, and that the county will side with the HOA. She is wrong on all counts." "I know. So do most of the other board members, but Deborah controls 3 of the 5 votes and she is refusing to budge." "Why are you telling me this?" Gerald sighed. "Because there is going to be a special election. A group of residents is collecting signatures to recall the entire board and hold new elections. They have more than enough signatures. The vote will happen in about 3 weeks. Interesting. If the current board is recalled, I think the new board will be more reasonable. More willing to negotiate." "I am always willing to negotiate in good faith," I said. "But I am not dropping the toll until there is a settlement that addresses my concerns." "Understood. I just wanted you to know that change might be coming." We talked for a while longer. Gerald was actually a decent guy, just stuck in a bad situation. He had voted against cutting corners on the bridge construction, but had been overruled. He had wanted to settle with me from the start, but Deborah would not allow it. The recall election happened 4 weeks after the bridge collapse. It was the most drama Meadowbrook Heights had seen in years. Campaign signs, heated community meetings, accusations and counter-accusations flying everywhere. Deborah Patterson fought to keep her position, arguing that she had been a steady hand for 5 years, that the bridge collapse was an unforeseeable accident, and that I was the real villain for exploiting the situation. The opposition, led by a group of younger residents who were fed up with the old guard, argued that Deborah's leadership had been reckless, that she had ignored safety concerns, and that her refusal to negotiate with me was costing everyone money. On election day, I did not vote technically. I was an HOA member, but I had made it a point to never participate in their governance. I figured my absence spoke louder than any vote. The results were decisive. Deborah Patterson was out, along with Karen Hartwell and 2 other board members. Gerald Thompson kept his seat, likely because people knew he had tried to be reasonable. 4 new board members were elected, including a lawyer named Jennifer Park, who had been vocal about the need for accountability. The new board held its first meeting a week later. I was invited to attend. Jennifer Park, now the new board president, was in her early 40s, sharp, professional, and no nonsense. She opened the meeting by acknowledging the bridge collapse and its aftermath. "We are here to clean up the mess left by the previous board," she said bluntly. "That starts with resolving the lawsuit with Mr. Morrison and addressing the environmental violations. Mr. Morrison, we would like to negotiate a settlement if you are willing." "I am willing," I said. "My terms have not changed." Acknowledgement of responsibility, professional cleanup and restoration, dropping all citations and fines and payment of legal fees. Jennifer looked at the other board members. "Those terms seem reasonable given the circumstances. We also need to discuss the toll road situation." "The toll stays in place until we have a signed settlement agreement," I said. "Once the settlement is signed and the cleanup begins, I will open the road free of charge to residents while the work is being completed. After the bridge is repaired or replaced, we can discuss long-term arrangements." "What if we cannot afford to repair the bridge right away?" asked one of the new board members, a man named David Chen. "Then we negotiate a long-term toll arrangement that is fair to everyone. Reduced rates, maybe a community pass system. I am not trying to bankrupt anyone. I just want accountability." Over the next 2 weeks, the lawyers worked out the details. The HOA agreed to all my terms. They issued a formal acknowledgement that the bridge collapse was due to negligent construction and maintenance. They hired a professional environmental remediation company to remove the debris and restore the creek bed. They dropped all citations and fines against me and agreed to pay $25,000 for my legal fees and property damages. In exchange, I agreed to open the access road free of charge for 6 months, while the HOA arranged financing for bridge repairs. After that, we would implement a discounted toll system, $5 per crossing for HOA members, with monthly passes at $150, until the bridge was fixed. All toll revenue would go into an escrow account to be used for bridge construction, with any excess returned to me. The settlement was signed on a Tuesday morning. By that afternoon, I had removed the toll requirement and opened the gate. The environmental cleanup took 3 weeks. The company the HOA hired was thorough and professional. They removed all the debris, restored the creek bed, replanted native vegetation, and installed erosion controls. The county inspector approved the work, and the fines were reduced to $20,000, which the HOA paid. Life started to return to normal, or whatever passed for normal, in Meadowbrook Heights. The residents of Eastbrook Drive were relieved to have free access again, even if it was temporary. Some people apologized to me for the nasty things they had said or written. Others still glared at me when they drove past. I did not really care either way. The new HOA board turned out to be much more competent than the old one. They hired an independent engineering firm to assess the bridge situation. The report was damning. The original construction had been substandard in multiple ways, the materials were inadequate, and the foundation was never properly set. Building a safe replacement would cost around $200,000. The HOA did not have that kind of money in reserves. Deborah Patterson's financial management had been as questionable as her construction oversight. So the board arranged a special assessment. Each household would be charged $2,000 to fund the bridge reconstruction. There was grumbling, but most people understood it was necessary. While all this was happening, the County Environmental Office completed its investigation. The findings were severe. The previous HOA board had violated multiple permit conditions, failed to conduct required inspections, and caused significant environmental damage when the bridge collapsed. The county decided to pursue criminal charges. Deborah Patterson, Karen Hartwell, and the contractor who built the bridge, Karen's brother-in-law, as I had suspected, were all charged with criminal negligence and environmental violations. The charges were serious, carrying potential jail time and heavy fines. I was called to testify before the grand jury. I brought all my documentation, the meeting minutes where I objected to the construction, the photos of the collapse, the records of the HOA's failure to conduct inspections. The assistant district attorney was very interested in the timeline of events and the decision-making process. The grand jury indicted all 3 defendants. The trial was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, construction began on the new bridge. The HOA had learned its lesson. They hired a reputable engineering firm, got multiple bids from licensed contractors with proper insurance, and established an oversight committee to monitor the work. Jennifer Park asked if I wanted to be on that committee. I declined, but I appreciated being asked. The new bridge took 4 months to build. It was much more substantial than the old one, steel and concrete, properly engineered for the soil conditions and the creek's flood patterns. It was not as charming as Deborah's decorative vision, but it was safe and functional. During the construction period, the toll system I had negotiated worked smoothly. The reduced rates were fair, and the revenue went into escrow as agreed. When the bridge was completed and inspected, I had collected about $18,000 in tolls. Per our agreement, $15,000 went toward the final bridge costs, and I kept $3,000 for road maintenance and my trouble. The criminal trial happened in early November. I attended most of it, partly out of civic duty and partly because I wanted to see justice served. The prosecution laid out a clear case. Deborah Patterson had ignored engineering recommendations, pushed through a contract with an unqualified builder who happened to be related to her treasurer, failed to establish required inspection protocols, and then tried to blame me when everything fell apart. Karen Hartwell had facilitated the contract with her brother-in-law and had signed off on financial documents that falsely claimed inspections had been conducted. The contractor, whose name was Michael Hartwell, had cut corners, used substandard materials, and lied on inspection reports. The defense tried to argue that the collapse was an unforeseeable accident, that they had relied on professional advice, and that any mistakes were administrative oversights rather than criminal negligence. The jury did not buy it. Deborah Patterson was convicted of criminal negligence, environmental violations, and fraud. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, with 6 months suspended, and ordered to pay $50,000 in fines and restitution. Karen Hartwell was convicted of fraud and environmental violations. She got 1 year, with 6 months suspended, and $25,000 in fines. Michael Hartwell got the harshest sentence, 2 years in prison for criminal negligence, fraud, and environmental crimes. His contractor's license was permanently revoked. Watching them being led out of the courtroom in handcuffs was surreal. A year ago, these people had been running the HOA, telling me what I could and could not do with my property, threatening me with fines. Now they were convicted criminals. I did not feel triumphant, exactly. More like satisfied that accountability had been served. The new bridge opened with a small ceremony in December. Jennifer Park gave a speech about community responsibility and learning from mistakes. A few residents thanked me for pushing for proper accountability, which was nice. I removed the toll gate from the access road, but kept it maintained as a backup route. The HOA and I signed a permanent easement agreement. They could use the road for emergencies, or if the bridge ever needed maintenance. But it remained my private property, and I retained the right to gate it if necessary. Life settled into a peaceful routine. The new HOA board was competent and reasonable. They actually consulted residents before making decisions, hired qualified contractors, and maintained proper documentation. Imagine that. My lawsuit against the old HOA board settled separately from the criminal case. The HOA's insurance eventually agreed to cover some of the damages, and I received a settlement that covered all my legal fees, property damage, and a bit extra for my trouble. I used some of that money to do my own creek restoration project, planted more native vegetation, installed better erosion controls, and created a small wetland area that attracted more wildlife. It was satisfying to see the creek healing from the damage the collapsed bridge had caused. One spring morning, about 18 months after the original collapse, I was sitting on my back porch watching the mist rise off Willow Creek, just like I had been that fateful day. The new bridge was visible in the distance, solid and functional. Cars were crossing it on their morning commutes, nobody giving it a second thought. My phone rang. It was Jennifer Park. "Ethan, I wanted to let you know that the board voted last night to give you a refund of your HOA dues for the past year. It is the least we can do after everything that happened." I was genuinely surprised. "That is not necessary, but I appreciate it." "It is necessary. You were right about the bridge from the start, and the old board treated you terribly. We also wanted to ask if you would consider joining the Architectural Review Committee. We could use someone with your attention to detail and willingness to speak up when things are not right." I thought about it. A year ago, I would have said absolutely not. But the new board had proven themselves to be reasonable people trying to do right by the community. "Let me think about it," I said. "Take your time. The offer stands." After we hung up, I sat there for a while, watching the creek flow peacefully past my property. The whole situation had been insane: a collapsed bridge, a toll road, lawsuits, criminal trials, an HOA board going to prison. But somehow, things had worked out. I had stood up for my property rights, refused to be bullied, and held people accountable for their negligence. The community had learned some hard lessons about governance and oversight, and in the end, justice had been served. Was I still annoyed about being annexed into the HOA against my will? Absolutely. Did I still think HOAs were generally a pain in the neck? For sure. But at least now, Meadowbrook Heights had leadership that was competent and accountable, and if they ever screwed up again, well, I still owned that access road. A few weeks later, I was working in my garden when I saw a car pull up to my driveway. A young couple got out, looking nervous. They introduced themselves as Tyler and Emma, new residents on Eastbrook Drive. "Mr. Morrison, we heard about everything that happened with the bridge and the toll road," Tyler said. "We just wanted to thank you. If you had not fought back, the old board would still be in charge, cutting corners and making bad decisions. We feel safer knowing the current board actually cares about doing things right," Emma added. "So, thank you. It was a small moment, but it meant something." Most people had just complained about the toll or blamed me for the inconvenience. Having someone actually understand why I had done what I did felt good. "You are welcome," I said. "Enjoy Meadowbrook Heights. It is a nice community as long as the leadership stays honest." They chatted for a few more minutes, then left. I went back to my gardening, thinking about how strange the past year and a half had been. The thing about HOAs is that they can be great when they are run well, maintaining common areas, organizing community events, preserving property values. But when they are run poorly, they become little fiefdoms where petty tyrants wield power without accountability. Deborah Patterson had been exactly that type of tyrant. She had ignored safety concerns, rewarded cronies with contracts, and tried to bully anyone who questioned her. The bridge collapse had been inevitable, really. When you cut corners and ignore experts, eventually physics catches up with you. My toll road had been a calculated move. I knew it would make me unpopular. I knew people would call me greedy and vindictive. But I also knew it was the only leverage I had to force accountability. The HOA would not have settled if I had not had something they needed. Some people might say I should have just been a good neighbor and opened the road for free, trusted the system to work things out. But I had tried that approach when the bridge was being built. I had filed objections, cited engineering concerns, and offered constructive feedback. I was ignored. Sometimes, you have to make people uncomfortable to get them to pay attention. The toll road did exactly that. The following autumn, the HOA held its annual meeting. I actually attended this time. The new board presented financial reports that were clear and transparent. They discussed upcoming projects and asked for community input. They had learned from the previous board's mistakes. During the open comment period, someone asked about long-term plans for the bridge maintenance. Jennifer Park answered confidently. "We have established a bridge maintenance fund with dedicated annual funding. We have contracted with an engineering firm for quarterly inspections. We have protocols in place to address any issues immediately. The bridge has a projected lifespan of 50 years with proper maintenance, and we intend to maintain it properly." A far cry from Deborah Patterson's approach of building it cheap and hoping for the best. After the meeting, several people came up to talk to me. Most were cordial, some even friendly. The anger and resentment from the toll road period had largely faded. People understood now that I had been fighting for accountability, not just being difficult. One older gentleman, a longtime resident named Frank, shook my hand firmly. "Ethan, I owe you an apology. I was one of the people who signed the petition to seize your road. I thought you were just being a jerk. I did not understand what you were really doing until I saw what the county investigation found. You were right all along." "I appreciate that, Frank. No hard feelings. The community is better off because you did not back down. A lot of us realize that now." Moments like that made the whole ordeal worthwhile. I eventually did join the Architectural Review Committee. It met once a month to review proposals for home improvements, new constructions, and community projects. The work was mostly boring, reviewing deck plans, approving paint colors, that sort of thing. But occasionally, something important would come up, and I could provide input that prevented another disaster. When someone proposed building a gazebo near the creek, I was able to point out drainage issues that nobody else had noticed. When a contractor bid on a retaining wall project seemed too low, I suggested getting additional quotes. Small things, but they mattered. The best part was that people actually listened. The new board culture was collaborative rather than authoritarian. Expertise was valued. Dissent was welcomed. It was how an HOA should function. 2 years after the bridge collapse, Meadowbrook Heights had transformed. The physical infrastructure was better maintained. The financial management was transparent. The leadership was accountable. It was almost like a normal, functional community organization. I was sitting on my porch one evening when Marcus Chen called. "Ethan, I just got word that Deborah Patterson is being released from prison next month. She served her full sentence. Good to know. Think she will cause trouble. Hard to say. She is barred from holding any HOA leadership position as part of her conviction, so she cannot get back on the board. But I wanted you to be aware. I appreciate it. Deborah Patterson moved back to her house in Meadowbrook Heights in March. I saw her occasionally at the grocery store or driving past. We never spoke. She looked older, harder, defeated. I did not gloat or make any comments. There was no point. Karen Hartwell had moved away after her release, apparently too embarrassed to stay in the community. Her brother-in-law, the contractor, had left Virginia entirely. Life moved on. 3 years after the collapse, the creek was healthier than it had been in decades. The wetland restoration I had funded was thriving, attracting birds, turtles, and even a family of beavers. The bridge stood solid and well-maintained, no longer a hazard or a liability. The access road on my property was still there, still maintained, but rarely used. The HOA had the easement for emergencies, but the bridge handled all normal traffic. Occasionally, someone would ask if they could use it as a shortcut, and I would politely decline. It was my road, my property, and I intended to keep it that way. I never regretted charging the toll. It had been necessary to force accountability and protect my interests. The fact that it led to a complete overhaul of HOA leadership and practices was a bonus. One afternoon, I was interviewed by a property rights advocacy group that had heard about the case. They were documenting examples of individuals successfully standing up to HOA overreach. What advice would you give to someone in a similar situation? The interviewer asked. Document everything, I said. Every communication, every meeting, every decision. Know your property rights and legal standing. Get a good lawyer early, and do not back down when you are in the right, even if it makes you unpopular. Popularity is not the same as being right. Do you think HOAs serve a useful purpose? They can if they are run well. But they need accountability, transparency, and checks on power. When board members start acting like petty dictators, that is when things go wrong. Communities need to pay attention to who they elect and hold them accountable. The interview was published in a property rights journal and got some attention online. I received emails from people dealing with their own HOA nightmares, asking for advice. I tried to help when I could, mostly by pointing them toward good lawyers and encouraging them to stand up for their rights. The whole experience had taught me that institutions, even small ones like HOAs, need constant vigilance. Power, even minor power over neighborhood regulations, can corrupt if left unchecked. The residents of Meadowbrook Heights had learned that lesson the hard way, but they had learned it. And that mattered. 5 years after the bridge collapse, I was interviewed by a local news station doing a "Where Are They Now?" follow-up story. The reporter was the same woman, Rachel Stevens, who had tried to paint me as a villain back when the toll road first went up. Mr. Morrison, looking back, do you have any regrets about how you handled the situation? No regrets, I said honestly. I did what I needed to do to protect my property and hold people accountable. The outcome speaks for itself: better leadership, safer infrastructure, a healthier community. Some people still think the toll was excessive. Those people are entitled to their opinion, but the toll was never about the money. It was about leverage and accountability. Without it, the old board would never have faced consequences. What is your relationship with the HOA like now? Professional and cordial. I serve on a committee, I pay my dues, I participate when appropriate. The current leadership is competent and reasonable, which makes all the difference. The story aired, and this time, the comments were mostly positive. People had moved on from the outrage and could see the bigger picture. I continued living on my property by Willow Creek, enjoying the peace and the wildlife. The bridge stood solid in the distance, a reminder of both the disaster that had been and the accountability that followed. My phone rang one morning. It was Jennifer Park. "Ethan, I wanted to let you know that I am stepping down as HOA president. My job is transferring me to Seattle." "That is too bad. You have done great work here." "Thank you. The board is holding elections next month. Several people have suggested you should run for president." I laughed. "Absolutely not. I am happy to help on committees, but I have no interest in running the HOA." "I figured you would say that, but I had to ask. You would be good at it. There are plenty of capable people. I trust the community to choose wisely. They have learned to, thanks in large part to you." After she hung up, I thought about how far things had come, from a collapsed bridge and a bitter dispute to a functional, accountable community organization. It had not been easy and it had not been pleasant at times, but it had been worth it. The new HOA president, elected the following month, was David Chen, the board member who had asked thoughtful questions during the settlement negotiations. He was smart, detail-oriented, and collaborative. The community was in good hands. I kept living my life, tending my property, watching the creek flow past. The toll gate was long gone, stored in my barn as a reminder of a strange chapter in my life. The access road remained, quietly available if ever needed again. Every so often, someone new to the neighborhood would ask me about the bridge collapse story. I would give them the short version, answer their questions, and move on. It was history now, not current drama. One thing I made sure of: I stayed involved enough to keep an eye on things. I attended the important HOA meetings, read the financial reports, and asked questions when something did not look right. Not because I distrusted the current leadership, but because vigilance is the price of good governance. The community had learned that lesson. Attendance at HOA meetings was higher than it had ever been. Residents actually read the meeting minutes. When board positions came up for election, people ran competitive campaigns with actual platforms. Deborah Patterson's legacy was not the decorative bridge she had envisioned. It was a community that had learned to demand accountability. Years passed. The bridge continued to stand strong, professionally maintained and regularly inspected. The creek remained healthy, the wetlands thriving. My property value increased significantly, both because of the improved HOA management and the environmental restoration work. I never charged another toll. I never had to. The story became local legend. The property owner who stood up to the HOA charged a toll on his private road and brought down a corrupt board. It was simplified and exaggerated in the retelling, as stories always are, but the core truth remained. I had defended my rights and demanded accountability, and it had made a difference. Looking back from the vantage point of years later, I could see how everything had connected. The initial annexation of my property into the HOA against my will, the bridge construction I had warned against, the collapse that could have been prevented, the toll road that gave me leverage, the settlement that brought change, the criminal trial that brought justice, the reformed HOA that brought stability. It had been a long, complicated journey from that morning when I heard the bridge groaning and watched it collapse into my creek. But it had led somewhere good. I was sitting on my porch one final time as the sun set over Willow Creek, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The bridge was a dark silhouette in the distance, solid and permanent. The creek flowed peacefully, as it had for centuries and would for centuries more. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mr. Morrison, this is Tom Brady from the Virginia Property Rights Foundation. We are giving our annual award to individuals who have successfully defended property rights against institutional overreach. Based on your case with the Meadowbrook Heights HOA, We would like to present you with this year's award." I smiled. "I appreciate the recognition, but I am not sure I need an award. I was just protecting my property." "That is exactly why you deserve it." Too many people back down when institutions push them around. You stood your ground and created positive change. The award ceremony is next month in Richmond. Will you accept? I thought about it. Recognition was not why I had done any of this. But maybe sharing the story more widely would help others in similar situations. Yes, I will accept. Thank you. The ceremony was small but meaningful. Other award recipients had their own stories of standing up to government overreach, corporate abuse, and yes, HOA tyranny. We shared experiences, traded lawyer recommendations, and laughed about the absurdity of having to fight so hard for what should be basic rights. My acceptance speech was short. I talked about the importance of documentation, knowing your rights, getting good legal help, and not backing down when you are right. I talked about how institutions need accountability and how individuals have the power to demand it, even when it is uncomfortable. The speech was recorded and posted online. It got shared widely, particularly in property rights and anti-HOA communities. I received more emails from people fighting their own battles, thanking me for the inspiration and advice. I helped when I could, always emphasizing the same principles. Document everything, know your rights, get proper legal help, and do not back down. The years continued to pass. Meadowbrook Heights remained stable and well managed. The bridge stood strong. The creek flowed clean. My property was peaceful and valuable. I never regretted standing up for myself. I never regretted the toll road. I never regretted demanding accountability. And I never forgot the sound of that bridge collapsing into the creek, the moment that changed everything. It had been a hell of a ride, from that morning of groaning metal and spectacular collapse to criminal trials and community transformation. But in the end, justice had been served, rights had been protected, and a community had learned the importance of accountability. That was worth more than any toll I had ever collected.